38 Studios, big investigation, kind of anticlimactic ending.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Of course, the big question is it an anticlimactic ending? I mean, where do we go from here now that the Rhode Island State Police have finished their investigation, sort of, and the Attorney General has said it's done, sort of, and we can't seem to get the records, sort of. All sorts of questions on this lingering problem for the state of Rhode Island, the 38 Studios debacle, as it's well known. Standing up and answering the questions, both at the press conference on Friday and here on the program tonight, the Colonel of the State Police, Stephen O'Donnell, is here for a one-on-one conversation about that. So with no further ado, here's the headline on Saturday after the Friday afternoon press conference. No charges, no documents, no new details, kind of the sub-headline. I thought the Journal's take on that was kind of on the money. Here's what Steph Machado filed as a report on Friday nights.
After 4 years, 2 grand juries, and 146 people interviewed, investigators found no probable cause for any criminal charges against anyone involved in the 38 Studios debacle.
A bad deal does not always equate to an indictment.
State Police Colonel Stephen O'Donnell and Attorney General Peter Kilmartin said the people interviewed by police included the members of the Economic Development Corporation, former Governor Don Carcieri, and 38 Studios execs, among others, but wouldn't elaborate on who exactly was interviewed. 11 people testified before a grand jury. No criminal conduct was found, but the grand jury process is secret and there are no plans to release any records from the investigation.
For those who are cynics and choose not to believe what is being presented today, no explanation will be sufficient.
The two did criticize the process by which lawmakers gave Curt Schilling's video game company $75 million, which later left taxpayers on the hook once 38 Studios went bankrupt.
This was not a transparent process.
Colonel O'Donnell called the deal flawed, said public officials ignored the risk factors, and some even lied.
There were people involved in the process that were less than candid with what had transpired.
But police declined to name those people or say if they are still in office. And the Attorney General left the door open, saying while this case is now inactive, if new details come to light, they could reactivate the case. Now, there's also a separate civil case against Curt Schilling and others that's set to go to trial in October, and the Securities and Exchange Commission has also separately filed civil fraud charges.
Alrighty, Colonel O'Donnell has been kind enough to join us. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming. You know that this wasn't going to go over well. Tell me what the chronology of events were that caused a Friday afternoon news conference. Why the timing on Friday afternoon in the middle of the summer?
No, certainly. We explained that, I did, in the beginning of the press conference, and apologized to the media coming on Friday. We live in the same media world that everybody else does, so we know what that means. But what happened during the course of the week, we had, I wouldn't say closed the investigation, but came to our investigative conclusions irrespective of what was going to happen in the civil trial. So during the week, other things just popped into the week that pushed it back until Thursday, and it really no bearing on the case, and then Friday. Friday was the state police graduation, and to push it to the next week, we thought if we pushed it to the next week, which would be this week, I'm traveling, the Attorney General is going to be traveling, and neither wanted to push this report out, understanding the dialogue it's going to create. So we're in a catch-22. If we don't put it out last week, we put it out this week, we leave town for our work structures. It's not like a vacation. We wouldn't be able to answer those questions that would come up, which is happening today. So that's really what happened, and it was right in the middle of it, noontime. We were graduating 26 troopers. So should have, would have, couldn't have.
But here's the thing,
didn't want to wait till this week.
But here's what I understand. You know what the connotation of a Friday afternoon news dump is, and what the media reaction is going to be, whether it's a legitimate news story or not. It's always the kind of thing where the syndrome is into a weekend, especially on a summer weekend. The political strategies, not that you were trying to politicize this, but the political strategy is usually to, bad news on a Friday afternoon. Why not keep it for a couple, 3 weeks? I mean, heck, we waited for 4 years. What was the impetus to say, oh, we've got it now, we've got it wrapped up, let's go?
No, it's a legitimate question. If you remember many, many months ago, when this had become back to the front page. The governor had spoken to myself and talked about getting the process out. She had mentioned, I want the process out, let's get this report done. They'd asked for a report, some type of report to come out from our investigation. There is so many pitfalls in that report because of grand jury issues, so we plodded along with that report. So the Attorney General and my staff put the report together. So when the report at the beginning of last week became ready to put out, that's exactly what it was. What was going to be done, we're going to put it out. It just happened to be then. The Friday, you know, I get all the Friday things, but we know it's a 24-hour news cycle. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's going to be a story anyhow. If we put it out Tuesday, we'd be at the same conversation today and tomorrow. Oh, where's the AG, where's the state police colonel talking about it? So, and I know I wasn't going to be here for a week because I'm going to be somewhere else. So we just decided it's a story no matter what day it is. If it was Sunday morning, it's going to be a story.
And I don't want to get bogged down now in that post-game chronology, but the combination of no public release of documents and a Friday afternoon exercise creates this kind of, you know, wet noodle feeling in terms of public expectation. And while I think you, in my review of the press conference, which I did not attend, it was an off day for me that last Friday, you know, I thought you were steady throughout. The Attorney General was in this defensive, and you can't answer for him, but I'll just state the dynamics of this from my perspective. He was in this defensive mode at the start. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to be happy, I'm paraphrasing, and the cynics will never be happy with this. And so that kind of, you know, defensive presentation, no release of any documentation, and a Friday afternoon event all lead to this kind of cumulative letdown that folks predictably would have, and it just wasn't well and respectfully orchestrated, I think, for the citizens. And we can cry all day about it. I think the real meat of the story is what the heck happened at 38 Studios in an investigation. But your last response, and just in terms of presentation.
No, I wouldn't.
I want to get to the meat. I want to get to the meat of the conversation.
Again, I said this in the media Friday. I'll say it again today. We understand that, but we knew either way. Whenever this gets released, we know there's expectation that went to this case, and there was a lot of expectation that someone is going to pay the price with an indictment. And at the end of the day, our job is to find if a crime happened, and that's not what happened here. As I said, a bad deal is a bad deal. Doesn't minimize it. Things happen that shouldn't have happened, but our function, our primary function, is to find criminal activity. That is not what happened. When it went out, if it went out today, tomorrow, it's a secondary issue. I get that piece of it, we do, but that's the way it happened. So I think the expectations in any case, candidly, Dan, is everybody wants someone to pay a price for it. But we live in a system of justice that when someone does break the law, they're held accountable. But when they don't violate a law, they shouldn't be held accountable neither.
Well, you know what? In all of my commentary and criticism on this, especially on the radio on WPRO weekdays 3 to 6, never have I suggested that you screwed up by not filing a charge. I have implicit trust in you and the state police to be able to determine whether or not there was a criminal charge here. I want you to be able to explain in the next segment why there wasn't, as much as and best you can. That's never been the thing. The thing is, you know, how this whole thing has been kind of handled from the get-go, and in part by the Attorney General's office. Let's just talk about the open records issue here, since that seems to be dominating the post-game cycle on this. We've got a headline here from today's newspaper, Open Government Groups, and by the way, a couple of them will be represented in tomorrow night's television show. They're asking for you know, all the records to be released. Here's an excerpt from a letter that they wrote. To put it simply, the disaster known as 38 happened because of a deeply ingrained culture of secrecy in the state. The official state investigation of that disaster should not perpetuate that culture. And John Marion from Common Cause spoke to me yesterday on the radio to kind of explain.
There isn't anything in the law that prohibits the state police or the Attorney General from revealing at least some of this information. It was presented, as you said, that this is still an open case, and that because there were no indictments from the grand jury materials can't be released. But as our letter, our 4-page letter says, it rebuts those ideas. There are a lot of materials other than the grand jury materials that could be released. There's nothing in the law that says if a case can be reopened materials can't be released.
If you can get a handle on that letter, it was a very well written letter, you should look at all the arguing points on that. Your reaction to the urgency that people feel to find out what you got in terms of paperwork on this?
Well, first, from John Marion and everybody else's perspective, I respect their opinion. Without question, I understand the point that everybody wants these records out, but I would disagree with them on many things. The grand jury process is the grand jury process. It's set up by the courts for a certain reason to be able to cultivate information coming out of there to not only uncover crime, but to protect somebody from being exposed publicly on something that's not a crime. So our charge initially was not to assess the agency. Our charge was to find a criminal violation. So when you use the grand jury, that's the rules. As for the records that we have that are separate and apart, or whatever may be asked for, every piece of paper that we've developed has a nexus to the grand jury because they call it like a segregated report. If we're talking to Dan York and we're taking a statement from you and then you go in the grand jury, there is a way that you could, by a process of elimination, figure out who testified or who didn't testify or who took the fifth or who testified against someone else. And that's protected material not by the state police, not by the attorney general, by the court. The court makes those decisions. Now, with that said, I don't have the authority to tell the court to give those records up. If the court decides to do that through whatever court order on a petition, then we'd abide by that. And I think it's really important to know that as a law enforcement agency, we have to abide by the laws how to investigate, but at the end of the investigation, we have to abide by those laws how to close those things. And APRA exists for a reason, and grand jury exists for a reason. So I wouldn't say we're in a catch-22. We can't release those documents because they're protected by a grand jury.
But the Attorney General can request the court for permission to do so.
Yeah, I'm not sure who can. I know the Attorney General can, and he certainly can, but that's his prerogative. As for the state police, that is not a prerogative. We just abide by the laws and the rules. If we chose to do that, I'd be in front of Judge Gibney's chambers and probably be held in contempt of court for doing so. So it's that serious.
All right. When we come back, we'll talk about what we do next and some of the issues involved in the chronology of investigative processes here that the Colonel and I will have a friendly debate over because we've had it before. In the meantime, I just want to let you know that if you're thinking about remodeling your kitchen or bath, come to the Kitchen and Bath Design Center would be a great choice. Kitchen adds value, but don't forget the bathroom does too. When it comes to convenience in the household and people bumping into each other morning, noon, and night, you may think, you know what, this might even be a better choice to renovate the bathroom. I can promise no matter whether you do the kitchen or the bath, with the project managers at Cumberland Kitchen and Bath Design Center, they will deliver licensed and insured contract work on time and on budget. Right back with the Colonel. Stay with us.
I think the combination of state police investigation and the oversight hearings is, the combination is enough to uncover wrongdoing.
That's a flip-flop.
It could be, but look, I'm the governor, I have to do what's right. When we did the RISDIC investigation, it was $6 million of taxpayer money. I am not, at this point, going to spend any more taxpayer money to do yet another investigation.
You know, let's go to Raimondo recently on Newsmakers on 38 Studios. Look, Colonel O'Donnell has laid out some of the intricacies of the law that he thinks absolutely prevent, without discussion, release of the documentation on the investigation. We'll see if the Attorney General petitions the court based on the public pressure that is coming. That is something that you'll observe. If asked, do you think you might be asked by the AG what your opinion is on that, based on the public's right to know and the primary public concern about this situation?
Well, I can tell you now, as the case is pending, you still have the civil piece. It's beyond, it's grand jury, but there's also the public disclosure of public records. So I'm not sure if my opinion matters, but if I'm asked, I would weigh in with the Attorney General. And I don't know, I just know the grand jury rules are severe, strict, and I don't have the authority to tell the court to release them. And if I felt like it was a good idea or a bad idea, I think that's probably beyond the scope of what the state police is supposed to be doing.
All right. Here are the couple. The governor indicated in the campaign when she was running that, yeah, she'd call for an independent investigation of 38 Studios. She has since reneged on that and, in my opinion, hid behind or waited for the state police investigation and this thing that bared out last week. You and I have had two disagreements that I'll refresh you on. One is, years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, when you were asked about whether or not legislative hearings, a la congressional hearings that people are akin to see or used to seeing in Washington when the legislature or the Congress polices itself, if they were to be held in some kind of grand fashion with subpoena power and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about the oversight committee hearings that actually did happen, which I think were, an exercise in futility. But a full-fledged hearing, you weighed in and said that you weren't comfortable, I'm paraphrasing, that you weren't comfortable with that based on it possibly interfering with the state police investigation. You and I debated that then, and I bring it up again now. Because I think what's happened here is you guys took the main throttle on an investigation. Now you pack it away, and the legislature and the governor sit there and say, well, listen, it was your job, and guess what? We can't see anything about it. So it leaves this complete wide open vacuum. Do you understand what my concern was years ago and what my concern is now?
I do.
Reaction?
I looked at it back then, I still look at it, another investigation is going to produce no more than what we already produced. I think what is missed in this
But it would
conversation...
have been public. That would have been a public exercise where you could have taken notes and added to your investigation to do it on whatever timing you felt, because I never, ever editorialized that you should, A, rush your investigation or minimize your investigation. But there was no, I see no reason why the state police couldn't have watched a public process, taken notes, cross-tabbed it with whatever you were able to generate, and then put out, even what you put out, even on a non-disclosed basis, because most of what the legislature would have done to itself would have exposed most of the processes, and we would have learned from it, if not provided some kind of criminal ammunition to you.
Yeah, I think as we've talked before, different minds can agree to differ. The reason I don't think that would get you any further is because people have a right to tell you, I don't want to talk to you. And they have the right to tell the police that by the Constitution. They have the right to tell the House Oversight Committee the same thing.
Yeah, but they got to do it in front of the public. They got to say, I don't want to talk to you in front of the public.
Fully agree. But my point is, we used different methods to try and compel people to talk to us. People have that right not to talk to us. So that would create a dual record. So for instance, we interviewed Dan York. We have a statement from Dan York. Dan York goes in the grand jury, give a statement to the grand jury. Then you give a statement to the House Oversight Committee or whatever committee that comes in. So you have 3 different statements. At the end of the day, all those statements are used to impeach you later as a witness. In our world, when we interview somebody, we want one statement from them, and then as we progress, if your testimony is different from that statement, we'll impeach you on that. So to me, whatever happens in privately besides what we do, I'm not sure you're going to get to the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, but you know what? At the end, you've left us. If we can't pry open the material in this investigation, you've left us in a place where we never get to get the bulk of the story, other than that which comes from the civil litigation, which has its own separate direction. And I just think that the public's right to know here should have weighed heavily in this unique kind of criminal investigation. The other thing that you and I have...
Can I interrupt
go ahead.
you just-
Sure, absolutely.
I fully agree with you on that. The right to know. I'm a citizen. I have the same people ask me questions. They like to know.
Yeah, well, you're a different kind of citizen. You know everything because you saw all the documents.
But the point is, but if I'm not, I want to know. Everybody that I know wants to know what happened, and I get that. But I think the distinction here is we're a criminal organization looking for crimes. That wasn't our charge. If someone said in the beginning of this case, we want you to assess this, and then we'd be in the same position where, like we did with Cranston, that gets asked to me quite a bit. We went into Cranston to do an assessment, and day one, I said, we're going to make that public. I announced that day one. It's different in this because we have rules of criminal procedure we have to operate.
Understood, but this is a bi-platformed problem. There are potential criminal issues, and then there are just legislative behavioral processes, good government, et cetera issues. And while it's not your responsibility to act for leadership, to say, hey, we're still gonna give this thing an enema legislatively, they've been able to hide behind your lead and say, you know what, it's all done. In fact, state police took care of everything. There's no criminality here. You left a convenient excuse for leadership to play rope-a-dope on this, and I just, that's our respectful disagreement, and I think in the end it's going to leave everybody wanting. There's one more thing that the Colonel and I differ on, and we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. With Colonel O'Donnell on 38 Studios, The other thing you and I have disagreed upon is a couple of years ago you kind of providing cover for the Attorney General, suggesting you were comfortable with him leading this investigation. I have to tell you, Colonel, I still don't understand why you have that perspective. The Attorney General, when he was a sitting legislator, voted for the enabling legislation that funded 38 studios. He's also reportedly been interviewed by the state police about this case. Any first-day law student or criminal justice student would say, you know what, gotta go. Just to clear the deck, I want everybody to be able to trust in this process, trust what our good state police are doing, and despite the career prosecutors that also make good decisions, I'm out of this case. That's part of the stench of 38 studios. The Attorney General never recused. Thought?
You and I have talked about this before, and we, again, agree to disagree. If he decided at the time, as he did, not to recuse, that's the Attorney General's decision. How that impacts the state police, if Peter Kilmartin, in my humble opinion, was elected by the people that live in this state, you are going to be our head law enforcement officer, we're asking you to prosecute cases, and he felt that he should recuse or not, that's his decision. He made that decision. Then it comes to me, Colonel, you comfortable? Yes, and the reason I told you I was, and I'm still am, because Peter Kilmartin, if you like him or don't like him, he's mandated by this state to prosecute cases for the state of Rhode Island. That's one. Two, if there's a question of his integrity, I would challenge you with, he's prosecuted Leo Medina, a state rep. He prosecuted, I forget the other, there was another one. And then he also prosecuted his Pawtucket police partner who went to jail. He prosecuted through that office. You could make the argument that, well, he was your partner when you were a policeman, step out. No, there's prosecutors that work for him that are professional, super prosecutors, and I go back to my agency. No trooper, no prosecutor would allow anything not proper to happen, irrespective of me or the Attorney General. And to close on that, they deal with 8,000 cases a year, and I mean that respectfully. He's prosecuted those people. We've never had an issue with, is that something he should do? And again, that's his decision, but once it comes into our wheelhouse, if I felt uncomfortable that the the Attorney General couldn't have somebody in his office, his prosecutors oversee this, we would have rang the bell. Or if any direction turned into...
Would you have publicly rang the bell?
If I felt that strongly that he shouldn't be involved, absolutely.
Well, you know, we're out of time for the most part here. The Colonel and I think we're on the radio this afternoon, flipping, we record early, and we'll have more of a conversation on this. He and I just respectfully disagree. He was an active voter, participant in the process. On its face, he should have stepped away, and people distrust this investigation, which is not fair to the state police, as a matter of fact, because of it. Anyway.
Well, if I can close, I'd just say I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that's his decision to make. And then when it came into my wheelhouse, does it impact how we prosecute a case? And I felt then, I felt today, no, because we're going to get to the truth with whoever.
Okay. Appreciate you coming and standing up for the questions. Last word coming up. Tomorrow night, some representatives of the open government groups who want to see the 38 Studios records exposed, they'll react to the Colonel's conversation and lay out why they think it ought to be done. We'll see you on the radio at 3 until 6 on WEPRO and back here tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.